just like a follow-up to what we started yesterday. Now, yesterday we looked at assessing the previous administrations, and of course we are looking at the three major people, of course, that have led us that are still alive. We looked at Obasanjo's regime, we looked at Goodluck Jonathan's regime, and then we looked at President Buhari's regime. Now today, follow-up to it, we are going to be assessing the President Muhammadu Buhari's 3 years in office. What are the indices that he brought in, or he actually promised to bring in? Now we're going to look at a whole lot of that. Has he been able to achieve certain things? At what point are we now? And then looking at just the administration in 3 years, what have this current administration, got to offer Nigerians? All is that we're going to look at for right now. And then we'll go for a short break. I have a guest. By the time we come back for the break, I will introduce him to us. I still remain Uche Uduma. Please stay with us. Welcome to National Discourse.
Current affairs.
We must not extricate anybody from corruption. If any one of them is found wanting, the due course and the law must take its course.
Nation building.
Administration is slightly different from the last one in the fight against corruption.
We need to really task our leaders, who are the religious leaders, from the emir, from the bishops, from whoever they can.
Some of our village markets, there are people, they call them in house like Nakama. They are like Agberu in the markets. Whatever anything is not useful to you is not important to you.
Politics.
What happened in Benue might be political. It still has an undertone, not political, dated way back. If you follow history.
It's interactive.
Not part of Nigeria.
Okay.
And it will not be good for us.
When they gather their people, they tell them, these Hausa people are your enemies. When the Hausas gather together, they tell them, these Igbo people are your enemies. When the Yoruba people gather together, they say the same thing.
Who are we? We are just from the background. And today, we are here in TSTV. And that is why we must propagate our own.
National Discourse. Weekdays on NCTV.
Right, so welcome back from that short break, and I have with me in the studio Mr. Kennedy Ambo. Thank you, sir. Of course, our regular analyst that is always here with us, helping us with an analysis of certain issues. You're welcome, sir, to the studio today.
Thank you.
Hope the rain didn't affect you anyway.
No, it was a beautiful rain.
Good. I like the smile for a very serious topic like this. All right, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you
now,
so much.
Going back to what we have today, we said we are assessing PMB's 3 years in office. What are the things that he's been able to achieve, and what are the things he promised that he's not been able to do? We are looking at it holistically, not facing a particular direction. So, sir, straight on. Where do we start from?
Well, first of all, we this is the first time of 2015 was the first time that incumbent president in Nigeria was defeated. It had never happened before. And so we saw history made in Nigeria in 2015. And as a build-up to 2015, there was a coalition or a coming together, a merger of different political parties, ACN then, CPC, AMPP, then a faction of ABGA led by Rocha Sokorocha. That was what we had. And then much more later, by 2014, we also had a new PDP that was led by former governors, Dem Saraki, Kwankwaso, and the rest of about 5 former governors. Now, that led to the fall of PDP that had promised and boasted that they were going to rule Nigeria for the next 60 years. And so we saw that truncated. And so they never made it beyond this 16-year mark of leading the country. Now we have APC that came, of course, chief among what the promise is change. And that was the slogan and the mantra upon which they rode to power, that they were coming to change things. And the question is, 3 years after, has anything changed? Yes, some things have changed. What has changed? I would say that essentially the people who are leading us, particularly the presidency, yes, that has changed. The National Assembly, apart from the fact that we have seen that the political party called APC is the dominant party in the National Assembly, both houses, that's the Senate and the House of Reps. But the actors themselves really didn't change. Bukola Saraki was a PDP. The Deputy Senate President is a PDP. Dogara was a PDP. And so if you look at it contextually, you'd see that not much really changed in terms of the actors. But then at the executive, yes, the head of the executive and his vice, yes, but then a lot of the ministers also, people who were in APC and PDP. And remember, the wife of the president had mentioned this before, that people who fought for APC were not given appointments, and people who just sat in their homes were called to the table. Now, let's look at the inauguration of the president. When he was inaugurated on the 29th of May, 2015, one of the things he told us is that he belongs to nobody, but he belongs to everyone. Now, that statement was greeted with some level of optimism and expectation that he was going to carry everyone along. So let's assess his first 6 months. His first 6 months as the president of Nigeria didn't see much of activities at all. What we saw was people having meetings, and it was after 5 months that he gave us the first list of ministers. Now, for me, that was a bit of a drag for our economy, a bit of a drag for our politics, and a bit of a drag for everything, our way of being. And so we saw that happen. Now, one of the things we were told that caused that delay was that he wanted to put square pegs in square holes, and that he also wanted to make sure that by the end of the day, we have technocrats, we have good people who would lead the economy. But we didn't see anything changed, because the same old people who had been in power before were the same ones the Minister of Power and Housing, Works and Housing, he was a former governor. And I'm not saying that if you've had position before, you shouldn't be in government that promises change. I'm not saying that.
Now, are you in any way saying that there is a kind of recycling of same people? Obviously, they've been recycling. I mean, you go and bring Colonel Hamid, who had retired, and you make him the head of customs. That's recycling. That's a man who had retired from service. You made him, and people within the rank and file of the organization are there that are qualified to run that organization. But then let's not go into the politics of even that. Then, all kinds of things. And so you saw people who had been in government for so many years still in government. And a lot of us expected technocrats like them Patutomi, them Falana to be part of this administration. But then we didn't see that happen. All we have seen is same old. And little wonder that right now, the economy went into recession. We must not gloss over that. Part of what led us into recession is poor policies, not properly thought through policies. And so those policies, you do a policy, you come up with a policy, and then you do a somersault on that policy. And so that also led us to recession. Thankfully, we exited that recession last year. But unfortunately, the last posting by NBC shows that Nigeria recorded a negative growth in the economy. So we took 2 steps forward and we're taking 1 step backward now. So if you look at it, we are actually cancelling some of the gains that this government has achieved. And so there is a need for concerted effort by the players and people at the helm of affairs to make sure that the economy really is bolstered. Now, having said all of that, what are the indicators right now? Let's look at our external reserve, which is something we should give praise to the government. The government has shot our reserve from 28 billion as at 2015 when they took over power to $47.7 billion dollars right now in our reserves. But then, alongside that also, what's our debt profile or portfolio right now? Our debt portfolio stands currently at 27-point-something trillion naira. What was it before this administration came into power?
It was below that.
Okay, now, if you're saying that our internal reserve has been boosted up, and then we have our debt rate increased. How do you reconcile the sharp?
Now that's where the handlers of this government and what they want the public to know is only the side that is positive, which is we have increased our foreign reserve to $47 billion. But then they don't tell you the other component of it. It's a two-sided coin. I mean, two-sided coin of same
Now,
piece.
I came across this piece that PDP ruled for 16 years and our debt rate was around, I really don't have
3 billion or so.
the number, of hand. But the APC have ruled us for 3 years now, and
they have borrowed $11 billion.
Good, just that fraction.
Now,
if a particular government in power, ruled for 16 years, 16 good years. I know it's split into 2 administrations. We know of that, right? Now,
3 administrations.
3 administrations. Most times. Yes, I know, but he didn't rule us for quite a while.
We had 4 years
Good.
under him.
Under him, but he didn't complete. Jonathan took over and all that.
That was government in continuum.
Good. Now, looking at that, I mean, where is that leading us to, or what is that telling us as Nigerians? Trying to look at these 2 political parties. We're not talking about the persons now. Let's look at the parties itself.
Well, that's a very good question. So let's look at, and I'm glad that yesterday you looked at the past administrations. So what's the correlation between the past and the present?
Yes.
And also the future. And so if you look at the correlation, you basically see that first of all was that we had a debt burden that the first 3 years of Obasanjo's administration, he used it in touring the world, basically put up a team that was headed by Okonjo-Iweala then, who also brought in her experience, her connections within the international community, because she was with the World Bank. Obieze also part of that, who also had a stint with IMF. And so the likes of Professor Soludo, Nuhu Ribadu, I mean, solid team that went to canvass for the debt cancellation of our parish club that we're owing, of the parish club we're owing. And it was an arduous task. However, we must applaud that because they were able to buy back our debts. And so we started on a note where basically our sins were forgiven and we were told, go and sin no more.
Now, let me quickly ask this question. If you look at Obasanjo's administration, all right, because I had a guest yesterday, a senatorial aspirant that spoke so much on what Obasanjo was able to achieve, looking at the kind of structures he met on ground. Now, looking at Nigeria was trying to transit from military regime back to democracy regime. Do you think it was so much difficult for him to have laid a platform? And then, peradventure, we had our current president then as the one that was supposed to lay a proper foundation for democracy. Do you think he would have done better than what Obasanjo did?
Well, I think to start with, Obasanjo did a number of things. The issue of corruption was also among the things that he achieved by creating ICPC, EFCC. I think there were 3 of them. Now, CCTV, I think the one that. Well, I can't get that now. I think now he did that. What was his aim? His aim was that we must clamp down on corruption, because corruption in Nigeria is something that dates back as far back as our independence. Because if you look at the first coup that happened was as a result of corruption, and people were killed, people were chased out of government, and then we had counter coups, several of them. And then we had the Second Republic that brought in Shagari then. And so again, this current president truncated that process because he also alleged that there was pervasive corruption then. And so we have seen that corruption has really crippled our economy, crippled our way of life and our value system. And so Obasanjo, in his wisdom, with his team, set up EFCC with the pioneering chairman, Nuhu Ribadu, whom I think has been the best we have had so far. Now, Nuhu Ribadu started the process of trying to make sure we clean Nigeria of corruption. However, it didn't come without some level of accusations of witch hunting. Now, the question you asked is that in Obasanjo's 8 years, did he lay the proper foundations? I would say to an extent, and to the best of his abilities, he did what he thought was right, but not entirely everything that we expected him that he did. One of those areas where he realized rather too late was the issue of the power project.
Yeah, no, hold it there. I wouldn't want us to go deep into it.
No, I'm not going to go deep into it.
I asked, a follow-up question to that. Like, if we were to have President Muhammadu Buhari then being the person to lay a foundation for democracy, as Obasanjo did, do you think he would have done it better?
What's the difference between 16 years and now? So, if Obasanjo couldn't do what he's supposed to have done, now you're there. 3 years has gone. Your first tenure is almost up. And he hasn't done anything. So I think he wouldn't have done anything either.
Good. Now, let us look at the power sector, what we are facing now, the power sector under this administration. I had people yesterday that spoke so much on the blame game, while we shouldn't, still be wallowing in the blame game. Now, if someone didn't do something better, like it took how many years? Now, there was an administration that came and left, and then you're coming back. Going back to that, like the reason why we are having power challenge was because someone allegedly ate up $16 billion that was
true.
meant for this.
That's not true.
Now, where are we? Where are we in the power sector?
Now, what was budgeted? What the projection was to use $10 billion to help start projects, the NIPP projects and all that. And it was supposed to look at 10 power plants across the country, Mambila, Geregu, and the rest of them inclusive. And but what he did was that he looked at the fact that over time, since power was created in Nigeria, the Kenji Dam, Shiruru, and Jeba, that there were no turnaround maintenance. And so he thought that rather than start new processes, why don't we do a turnaround maintenance and show up? Because like the one of Kenji Dam was supplying about 700 megawatts. And so he thought, and the capacity then was that if they did all of that, then we should have much more than what we had at the point. And so they started, but then they didn't know that the road was deeper than what they expected. Now, these are some of the flaws of leadership we'll talk about in Nigeria, where people do not really do proper survey and get to know the nitty-gritty. Before you even inject funds into it. And so by the time you realize that, oh no, this is a white goods chase, let's begin the process that would bring up new 10 plants. And so he started that late into his last 4 years. And so at the end of the day, he was able to start 3, to successfully do 3. Now, those that he started, about 3-point-something billion dollars was spent on that, and power generation increased minimally. Then the Yar'Adua administration came and suspended that whole process, the NIPP project. Why? Because he needed to investigate the rot, the corruption within that sector, and in that process we lost 2 years. Now the contractors that were mobilized had to go back.
So, can you just hold it there? We'll go for a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue this discussion. Please stay with us.
Welcome to National Discourse.
Current affairs.
We must not extricate anybody from corruption. If any one of them is found wanting, the due course and the law must take its course.
Nation building.
Administration is slightly different from the last one in the fight against corruption.
We need to really task our leaders, who are the religious leaders, from the emir, from the bishops, from whoever they can.
Some of our village markets, there are people, they call them in Hausa Nakama. They are like Agberu in the markets.
Whatever anything is not useful to you is not important to you.
Politics.
What happened in Benue might be political. It still has an undertone, not political, dated way back. if you follow history.
It's interactive.
Not part of Nigeria.
Okay.
And it will not be good for us.
When they gather their people, they tell them, these Hausa people are your enemies. When Hausas gather together, they tell them, these Igbo people are your enemies. When the Yoruba people gather together, they say the same thing.
Who are we? We are just from the background. And today we are here in TSTV. And that is why we must propagate our own.
National Discourse, weekdays on NCTV.
Yeah, you're welcome back from that short break, sir. Before we went for the break, we're looking at the power sector, what this administration have been able to offer. You know, we are not really looking at what was there before. We're looking at what they have been able to do in the power sector for the past 3 years. I mean, by Tuesday next week, 29th May, makes it exactly 3 years this administration took over power. So for the 3 years, what is a Nigerian, or what have Nigerians rather, you know, been able to enjoy in the power sector? Has anything changed from what it used to be before?
Before I answer the question, let me quickly say that the last administration was able to complete the 10 projects, power plants that the Obasanjo started. Of course, Yaradua suspended
sure,
it.
we saw continuity
yeah,
of
so he continued it.
Offices.
And so before the administration left, we got to about 6,000 in terms of generation, power generation.
Good.
But our problem has always been transmission and distribution. And so this government came on board and started working on it. The minister has been working effortlessly to make sure that he shows up the amount of power we have right now. But then there was a time, about 2 occasions, where the system shut down completely, nationwide. And it got to 0. And then we started climbing up again. And at the last count, we were told by the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, and also the Vice President, that we are currently generating about 7,000 megawatts. But then the transmission and distribution is where the problem is. What has they done? What have they done differently? Not much. Some people would call and say, listen, in my area I have noticed some considerable improvement. In some areas you would hear people say that, I know of people who have not had light in the past 1 week, 2 weeks. I know them. And I know of some people who say that in the last 2 weeks I have had uninterrupted
power supply,
or at least 18 hours power supply. And so it's neither here nor there. Now, one of the things we also need to understand is that in terms of transmission, there are 2 basic major lines. So it's either you're on the 33 kVA line or the 11,000 kVA line. The 33,000 kVA basically gives a lot of light because it's the high tension grid. And so people who are hooked on that most times enjoy power, because that's basically the line dedicated to government and government parastatals and all that. And so it's neither here nor there. Then another important factor is the amount of water. During rainy season, yes, you are bound to see increase. Why? Because 86% of our power generation comes from the hydro sector, hydro power plants, which is the 3 dams. And then 24% is on the other side.
Now, generally,
generally,
your general assessment, would you say this administration has done any better in the past?
Generally, in terms of, for them to do anything, you need to look at the policies that they have already put in place.
You're talking about this administration.
This administration.
Now, both them are the policies are put in place. How has it affected Nigerians in the power sector? Like, what is your kind of, if you're asked to grade or give to from 0 to 100%, what would you say this administration have done in the power sector?
I think if I'm going to grade them, I would say this administration maybe 22%.
Okay.
And it's just like any other past administration, really. I can't grade anybody more than that. Because if you look at our national consumption per capita, we are consuming about 151 kilowatts per annum per individual. And if you go to countries like Ghana, Ghana triples that consumption rate. If you go to South Africa, South Africa's power consumption is about 30% higher than what we have.
Okay.
So, South Africa used $50 billion and they are generating over 40,000 megawatts. And here, and I'm sure we've spent more than that in the last 19 years without generating up to 10,000 megawatts. So what is our albatross? Our albatross is in the fact that the operators are corrupt. Then another thing that I have found that is quite appalling is the fact that government sold some of these national assets, and then you're still giving bailouts to companies that bought these assets. So I think that is a complete no-no for me. And now, if you look at it, why are we not having investors in that sector? Because the policies that are supposed to drive the investors to come in are not there. And essentially, nobody wants to come and invest in hydro power plants.
Now, do you think we can get anything right in this sector? Now,
Yes,
having looked at this sector, rise, fall from administrations to administration. Now, where we are now, the point we are now, do you think there is something better that we can do in this sector? Do you think there's something the government has the power to do in this sector? And of course, looking at that, you have next year, coming up as an election year. So if the government has spent 3 years, what difference can they make in power sector from now to next year, or let's say in less than a year?
The truth of the matter is that when any government takes over power, the first thing you want to do is what were your promises, your campaign promises? And you must hit the ground running immediately. So that your first 2 years, you achieve most of the things you promised that you're going to achieve. Because the third year is already election. Whether we like it or not, President Buhari has already started campaign.
Sure.
He has started, even though the laws said nobody can start campaign until the bans are lifted. But they have started. And so, not much can be achieved right now as we speak. Having said all of that, we're talking about policies. If you're going to look, the chief policy we need to look at for us to open up that sector is to go back to the Constitution and remove electricity generation from exclusive list. Because as we currently are speaking, if I decide to start generating power at the backyard of my house and I generate and it gets to 50 megawatts, automatically it ceases to be my property. The government takes over from it and I probably might not even get 1% of that. Why? Because the policy says that once you generate about 50%, 50 megawatts, you must connect it to the national grid.
Now, if you remove power from exclusive list, where do you exactly want it to be fixed?
Now, you can fix it within the concurrent list.
Okay.
Concurrent list in the sense that state governments can generate. Now, I think it's the state of Texas or so that they generate a lot of power. I'm not sure on that now. And because it's been decentralized, the system has been decentralized, you can generate and sell. Now, states like Lagos can generate enough power. They have started. Let me give you an example. Lagos state government gave out a contract for the construction of power plants and all that it was up to the tune of $6 billion. And government guaranteed that project. But because within the ambit of the law, the Lagos state government couldn't do that. The government had to guarantee it. Now, because Lagos state government didn't continue with that project, the loss on that project, $6-point-something billion, awarded to an American company, we have been dragged to court, to an arbitration, where government now has to pay. Federal government now has to pay the $6 billion. Another project like that also happened. And so in all, initially we talked about our reserve. So currently, beside our 21.7 trillion debt profile, there is another new $11-point-something billion that will soon drain money from our reserve.
Okay.
And so, if you remove it from the exclusive list, then you can have, I know NASCO, for example, in Jos. I've been to the place. I did a small research there, where NASCO generates the power to power their plants within Jos, in Plateau State. And I know that if you decentralize the process and you make it open, some people can go into it and generate. Now, if you go to Oyo State, there are over 47 dams in Oyo those dams can generate some level of power that you can transmit to the localities within that area, and you would free up. Now, what is the implication of that? The implication is that when you free up the space for people to get involved, you will now begin to see industrialization. The reason why we have not been industrialized is because chiefly among them we do not have power. And so, if you look at industries that closed down in Kano, the mat factory, the sack factory, and then you go to textiles factory in Kaduna and Ibadan, Ogun State, most of those factories shut down because there were no enough. I mean, the cost of the overhead cost, which is primarily the cost of generating your own electricity to power your factory, was too much. I mean, let me give you a recent example. The 5 last edition of Big Brother Nigeria has been done outside Nigeria, in South Africa. Why? Because you need to stream 24/7 uninterrupted. You have never seen, I mean, a lot of people watch it. You have never seen power gone off for 1 second. Why? Because they have enough electricity. In fact, the electricity that powers only Johannesburg International Airport is more than what we generate here.
All right. Now, I wouldn't want us to dwell so much in power. You've already given us your not really score. You've given us what you think.
22%.
22%. That is what the government worth when it has to do with power generation,
yes,
or in the power sector. Now, when you were talking, you talked about, trying to keep to campaign promises and all that. Now, 2014, this administration, one of the things or slogans that actually brought them to limelight is change. And the change is the fact that they were going to fight corruption. Now, we are winning that fight against corruption.
Well, you must give credence where credence really belongs. This government has made recoveries that no other government in the history of Nigeria has made.
Okay.
The last count, EFCC chairman told us that over 500 billion naira, or so, I'm not sure now, was recovered. Houses have been recovered. Properties have been recovered. And we have not quite secured convictions the way we would want to see it. Now, that is completely outside the control and the purview of the executive. And one of the statements the president made was that his greatest challenge is the judiciary in the fight against corruption. However, one of the things we have also seen is for the executive and the judiciary to close ranks. I know that the executive also put forward a bill to the National Assembly to have a special court to try corruption cases. But the National Assembly hasn't done enough. Now, I'm sure we're going to examine the National Assembly separately.
Sure.
They haven't done enough, and so that bill has not even been read, has not gone through any reading at all, and so that bill is just sitting down there, gathering dust. So the executive is quite handicapped when it comes to securing convictions. However, in trying some of these cases, we have also seen that they have lost more cases than they have won. Michael Zekome, for example, has floored them more than 21 times on every case he has had with them at the court. And the reason is simple, that sometimes you do not have your evidence enough, or sometimes that the lawyers are smarter than the counsels to the EFCC or the prosecuting team, and so sometimes they go on technical grounds and give them technical knockout at the courts. And so not necessarily because those matters do not have merit in themselves, but technicality in terms of sometimes jurisdictions, sometimes the composition of different things. And so they lose out on such counts. And the thing with that is that once you have been technically defeated on a matter, the law says that you cannot try someone twice, you're a lawyer, on the same matter. And so we are losing because, number one, most of the prosecution team of the EFCC, some of them cannot square up with, some politicians will go as far as hiring 80 lawyers, senior lawyers, silks, to defend them. And so these people know they are onions and they would always frustrate the process. So now we need to also look at the laws.
Now,
one of the things...
Hold on there. Are you saying the EFCC don't have what it takes to get the most efficient lawyers?
I wouldn't outrightly say they do not have what it takes.
Okay, so where do you think lies the problem?
The problem is that it's also in the jurisprudence. Now, if you go to a country like China, for you, if you're a lawyer, for you to take up a case, a corruption case, you must examine it, because sometimes both the lawyer and the accused might take a fall. And so any lawyer who is going to go and defend a criminal would have to examine himself. Do I want to fall with this politician? And that's why you have the rate of conviction and execution of corrupt politicians in China. Now back home, our laws are so. You're a lawyer, you know, you've been to courts, you know how the cases go, and so sometimes the bench and the bar are not at par. And so you see that the bar, it has people who understand the law very well, and so the people at the bar, at the bench, sometimes get twisted by these lawyers, and they know the antics. They know how to get the judges, they know how to please them, or how to frustrate the judges and the cases by dragging them and all that. And that's one of the things we have seen. So we need the judiciary to sit up and to look at issues critically and say, we want to deal with this Malay. And this issue of corruption in Nigeria has eaten us. The reason why we do not have power, we do not have infrastructure, roads and everything, is because of corruption, nothing else. Because we have pumped enough money into all these sectors, but we haven't gotten commensurate results.
Sorry to distract you. While our president was still talking about the $16 billion during Obasanjo's regime, he made a statement that ever since he left PTF, that Nigeria does not have good roads. I'm not sure he said good roads, but he said Nigeria have not built roads ever since he left PTA. And if you want to take our minds backwards, you discover that it's so long a time from where he served as chairman of PTF to now. So what happened between that time and now? Where have we been, traveling, or what happens to our roads? Have we been flying, or do we go through the waters?
No.
I mean, what do you think is the weight of that statement?
Yes, indeed, the statement carries weight. But I would also say something after this, which is the fact that what we had in the 80s basically were standards. And so you saw conformity to standards. So roads were built then that could last 10 years, 15 years, 20, 30, 40 years.
Okay.
But the roads we have built since the inception of this democracy, 19 years after, down the road, are roads that they just pour asphalt on the road. And so we do not conform to standards. One of the things you have noticed in Abuja,
are you seeing that as a result of corruption or incompetence?
Corruption. It's not incompetence, because the same people who built these roads are the same people who built the ones in 20, 30 years, 40 years ago. What has changed is that we have drifted from keeping to standards. Let me explain to you. Every department, every agency is supposed to have M&E, monitoring and evaluation, but they do not do that. They look the other way, because part of that money. Now, Adams Oshiomhole, I was in a forum where Adams Oshiomhole mentioned this issue. Have you noticed that in recent times, roads that are being built do not have pedestrian lanes? In those days, you could walk on pedestrian lane that was as thick as that can carry one truck on that pedestrian lane. But these days we don't have it. Why? Because the contractors collude with the people in the ministries and departments and agencies that monies for that, just give it to us. Now, when you're supposed to have signposts, signages and all that on the roads, which is best practice international standards, we don't have them. The contractors in cahoots with these people, we pocket that money. And we have seen something recently, that roads that were awarded during the last administration and some administration before then, when this government came on board, because of the fear of prosecution, they went mobilized back to go and construct those roads.
Okay, now, in a nutshell, you're in agreement with the statement?
I'm in agreement. However, we have also seen that the vice president actually alluded to the fact that Jonathan's administration has constructed more roads than all the governments in the past.
Okay.
So, on one hand, I have given you the reason why I think that statement has validity, in the sense that most of those roads built then could last for a while, and the spread of the network was quite much. However, the last administration did a lot of road construction according to the vice president, based on the assessment they have done. And I think the minister
your
also
challenge
of works.
is it does not confirm.
My challenge is this, and I'll give you a quick example.
International standards.
Yes, let me give you an example. If you're going to Jos from Gidanwaya all the way to Jos, the road was constructed under Jonajang. But as at the time before Jonajang left office, that road had already started falling apart. It didn't last up to 5 years, but billions were spent on that road. And so we have seen these projects over time. And then one of the things we have done in recent time is to create agencies like FEMA and all that, road maintenance agencies. And what they simply do is that a lot of funds are allocated to them, and they just do maintenance. It's good to maintain. But why do we maintain roads that we built only 3 years ago, 5 years ago? It's because they, in the first instance, didn't conform to standards. And so, yes, corruption has been at the root of it all. And we need to deal with that issue. So, yes, the president is right to have said what he has said, but then roads also have been built, but then not quality roads in that.
Now, coming back to corruption.
Yes.
Now, if the government, according to you, have done well in trying to recover, looted funds, now, do you think this fight has been lopsided? Looking at the
without you even landing your question, yes, it has been lopsided. First of all, we're going to talk about the Abacha loot also.
Yes,
but then
might not be today.
It might not be today. All right. We have been receiving monies from all over, left, right, and center from Abacha's loot. I remember the president said that Abacha was never a criminal. But then this is a government that believes in fighting corruption. Now, what have we said with the fight against corruption? It's the fact that, and PDP's national spokesperson has talked about this, that there is deliberate effort to make sure that opposition is clamped down. And how? To make sure that most of their key players are taken to court on trumped-up charges of corruption allegation. Now, remember that this administration, Lai Mohammed, came out with 2 lists. First list and supplementary lists of, yes, that's what we had in university, of people's names that had stolen money, allegedly. Some are in court. They have not been proven. And then we have seen cases like Olisa Metu and the rest of them in court. Even though I do not subscribe to the fact that the man is sick and the court has, well, I shouldn't make a statement on that because it's prejudice. Now the case is in court. I think that cases like that are there. But what we have seen is that people are being taken to court for 20 million naira. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. They should be. But then we also see weighty allegations bordering on some people within this administration that we have not even opened the box at all of investigation. And so that is where a lot of analysts believe and pundits believe that the fight is not holistic. Yes, we want this fight to be fought. Nigerians are unanimous on the fight against corruption, but then it must be holistic. Now, some people will say you cannot fight everybody. Now, that's why we need to look at the capacity. And it's only EFCC that we see doing most of these fights. What is ICPC doing in terms of the fight against corruption? And so I think what we need to do is to build more capacities, empower more people more agents within the organizations to carry out this. And so that they can open files not only on people who are in the opposition. Now the question is, yes, it may look like they are against the oppositions, but are there validity? Is there validity within the allegation? It's up to the court to prove that. And so if the opposition is complaining that is witch hunt, I believe that every witch should be haunted. However, the circle would continue. Yes, so the witches in this administration will someday be witch hunted too. So yes, the president might not, he cannot possibly fight all the corruption cases, because these are cases of many decades and all that. So yes, it has to go on, but I expect that this government should somehow also inject some people from, and I like what has happened, that two former governors that ran to the party to get cover are being prosecuted right now.
But the truth is, they ran.
But
to
they
the
are
party.
saying no. But they are
Right?
saying they ran to the party. Yeah, let me tell
For
you
the
something.
purpose of
One of the things
being
that has
covered.
been happening is that people who stole money run to, and but I don't want to mention names on your station. A lot of them ran ministers, governors.
If you want to bring up a list.
No, I will not bring up a
make
list.
it public. But you bring
PDP
the
has
list,
done enough of that. PDP
Okay.
has a list
Okay.
of people who ran to take shelter under the umbrella, and their sins have been forgiven. And so, yes, those lists are there. But we heard of two former governors within APC. But why are they now being prosecuted? We hear that as a result of the last conventions within the state, local government, and ward levels, because they are at loggerheads with the powers that be, they are now being hauled to the courts. Remember that when the Minister for Women Affairs openly declared, open secret it was, that she was going to support a particular candidate against the principal, her principal currently, the first thing we saw in less than 24 hours was the fact that a charge of 12 million naira allegation misappropriation was whipped out against her. But the moment that issue died down, the issue of that 12 million naira has also died down. So you have seen incidences like this. The issue of the former SGF is there. And so yes, there are so many issues that this government should be able to take up, and they will have the support of the people, including those within their parties, the ranks of the party, but they are not doing that.
The monies that have been recovered, right? Most times, if you go to social media, discover that there are so many questions Nigerians are asking, right? Now, these monies that have been recovered, where are they?
Now, that's a question all of us must
what
ask.
purpose are they being kept?
Now, the Director General of DMO, Debt Management Office, came out 3 days ago and said that if we do not borrow, 2018 budgets cannot be financed. You know what that simply says? That the country is broke.
There is no money.
There's no money. However, we have had recovery of $322 million of Abacha's loot from Switzerland. And EFCC had said that we have recovered more than 500 billion naira. Now, our 2019 budget, 2018 budget is about 9.1 trillion naira. The question is, by the time you convert the $322 million dollars, is even more than that amount. So, but we have not, yet government says that they need to borrow. And so the question is, one of the conditions that was given is, of course, there was an MOU between the Nigerian Attorney General and the Swiss Attorney General. And one of the conditions is that you must reinvest these funds into social infrastructure and all that. But we have not seen where the government has said we're going to apply back this money. Yes, the Minister of Finance said that the money will be used for social infrastructure, but they have not given us details. And that is where the problem is. Because when you do not give details, then you open rooms for people to filter this money away. Because you need to tell us that $10 million of this money is going to go into education.
Sure.
And in that education, we're going to look at the tertiary education, and we're going to give them $5 million. That tertiary education, Unilag will take $2 million. Abakaliki would take $500. So you need to break it down to that, so that we can track. Because we have thank God for what's going on. There's a group called Budgets, an organization called Budget, that does tracking of our budget. So you need to bring it down to specifics, and that is what they haven't done. And that is the albatross of this government. They do not know how to communicate with the people, and so they leave us open and just allow us to make assertions.
All right. Now, looking at next year's election, very unfortunate we can't go on with, picking some indices to look at them very well. From the ones we've done already, we've talked about corruption, power, and of course your first earlier statement that was general, looking at what this administration have been able to achieve. Now, what do you think both the success and the failures of this administration, the impact is going to have on them coming next year? Having in mind that this administration is coming back, for second term, what do you think the impact is going to be on?
Personally, and these are my personal views, one of the things that gave the president the victory of 2015 were the votes from the North Central and the South West. And so if you are projecting into 2019, what have we seen differently? What gave him the victory in the last election? Are those indices still there? The answer is no. Now, the fight against insecurity or insurgency, as it was then, was number one.
We didn't even go into security.
No, we didn't go into that.
It's a whole topic.
No, that is a topic on its own for a whole day or 2 episodes. And so the government came, said that they were going to wipe out Boko Haram
in 3 months.
In 6 months. In 6 months. And down the road, Boko Haram is still killing, kidnapping, and all that. They are still taking our children, and we are still negotiating and paying them millions of dollars.
And we have a sudden upsurge of...
No, we're going to go there. Hold on.
I'm actually looking at time. We have just 4 minutes.
4 minutes. And so now, one of the things you see is that on a daily basis, around Kaduna, Birnin Gwari, Kaduna, Abuja Express Road, they are taking 87 people, 37 people on a daily basis unchecked. And so if you look at security-wise, this government has failed, including the one that they said they were going to deal with in 6 months. So they have failed. So when you look at the North Central and the Southwest, that was their major block, they have failed. And I don't think that these 2 areas are going to give them the kind of block votes that they got that gave them the victory of 2019. However, there is a caveat somewhere that the Southeast, where they didn't get enough votes, according to him, 5%, most likely, based on the campaign that are being carried out by the APC stalwarts from that extraction, might, for their selfish reason, give him block votes so that they can return power to the Southeast. So we do not know the mix yet. It might be here, it might be there. However, on a general note, I think the government, if I'm going to score the government on everything they have done in the last 3 years, including the appointment that is lopsided, I would say the government has not fed more than 42%.
All right. That is actually where we'll draw the curtain for today. We've been talking about assessing PMB'S 3 years in office. What has he done? What have he not? Of course, we still have in view that next week, 29th of May, is our Democracy Day. And that is actually the day that saw this government come in power. So all through next year, we're going to be assessing this government, what they have done, what they have failed to do, and the how much time they have to, make amends, But for me in the studio today, it's a goodbye. And I still remain your host, Uche Uduma. Thank you very much, sir, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll have you more next week when we'll be able to communicate effectively with our viewers. Thank you very much, and God bless.